Why even buy a watch? In a world where basically everyone carries a smartphone, it is a valid question. Now, maybe you don't carry your phone wherever you go. Maybe you just want to have the time on your wrist, or maybe you just want to wear something on your wrist. And so the question now changes to, why not just buy a smartwatch? I mean, smartwatches have way more functionality than a mechanical or quartz watch, and it's pretty much accurate almost all of the time. Well, today, we're going to be looking at the Moto 360, which is a smartwatch that was released over 6 years ago. And it's going to show us why watches like this Casio are timeless, and why watches like these end up never seeing the time of day. Now there's many types of smartwatches. Here we'll talk about Android smartwatches, and more specifically the Moto 360. And unlike a traditional watch, a smartwatch is essentially a computer strapped to your wrist. Now I purchased the Moto 360 back when it launched in 2014, and it's actually the third ever Android smartwatch to ever be released. Now this is actually a really turbulent time in Motorola's history because it was bought by Google in 2012 and then flipped to Lenovo in 2014. And between all of that, Motorola introduced its first ever smartwatch, the Moto 360. Now today's video isn't a review about the Moto 360 for a few reasons. First off, it isn't sold in stores anymore, probably for the best. And second, there's already tons of reviews from tech channels that outline all the specs, features, upsides, and downsides of this watch. But to give you a quick overview of this watch, here are some things that you should know. The Moto 360 runs on Android Wear. It has a TI OMAP 3 processor and 512 megabytes of RAM. It has 4 gigabytes of internal storage and an all-day 320 mAh battery. The watch display is a 1.56-inch LCD display with a resolution of 320 by 290 pixels, and other features include wireless charging, a heart rate monitor, pedometer, ambient light sensor, and dual microphones. Now there's really nothing out of the ordinary in terms of the specs of this watch, but now that it's over 6 years old, we can really see why smartwatches aren't as timeless as traditional watches. And the first and foremost issue is the battery. Alright, so let's face it, smartphones have kind of made traditional watches obsolete. And unless you're diving tens of meters below the surface, there's really no need to buy a traditional watch instead of just owning a smartphone. Now the story changes when we consider battery life and battery replacement. A typical quartz watch will take maybe 2 or 3 years before it needs a new battery, and of course, mechanical watches will run indefinitely until it needs to be serviced. Now this Moto 360 barely lasts a day on my wrist, and eventually when the battery just couldn't hold a charge, I tried to search up online on how to replace the battery with the new one, and it honestly just looked way too difficult for me to perform. So I looked online and I eventually found Ashley's Phone and Repair. She was the only repair place in Edmonton that would accept my watch for a battery replacement. So Ashley, what was it like repairing my Moto 360?
Oh, I do remember that one. That was a little annoying because opening them up is just it's not very fun. You need really specialized tools and they're so tiny and you even have to heat it up. I know with yours it was a little easier because the battery was swollen, so it had already lifted the screen a little bit. So that did make it a little bit easier for me to get in there, but then to actually get into where the battery was, there's these like tiny little clips around it that you kind of have to very, very carefully like twist and like pop up. And it's so easy to damage those clips because it's such fine plastic that, yeah, it was just a bit frustrating to do, but I mean, I'm pretty sure I managed to do it still, so.
So why do companies like Motorola make it so difficult to repair their smartwatches when things end up going south?
So yeah, the planned obsolescence is what they want. So basically they want a product that will only last 1 to 3 years. So every 1 to 3 years, they're having that same client, same customer coming back and purchasing something new rather than having something that actually lasts long. Like they do the same thing with vehicles, computers. They only want you to use it for so long so that they can get more money from you in the end. So they'll either make it so that over time it'll stop working, or they'll make it so that over time the operating system slows down and you're not able to update it to the most recent operating system. Yeah, especially with iPhones too. They love doing that. So
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this watch had to take a beating in order for the battery to be replaced. The new battery still dies in less than a day, and the battery ended up swelling again, causing this blue ring effect, but at least it's somewhat usable now. The functionality of this watch, however, isn't going to be as salvageable. So the last time the Moto 360 got an update was in 2016, and since then, Android Wear has been rebranded into Wear OS. New features have been added to the platform, and this watch, well, it's still stuck in 2016. And what that means is that there's barely any apps that still support this watch, and a lot of voice commands simply just don't work anymore. For example, if I wanted to send a text message to my friend, it simply won't let me. The same issue occurs when I try calling somebody. Using Google Maps is equally as useless. Okay Google, can you be useful for once? It still receives notifications from your phone, however, and it's also the only way where you can use your watch to respond to emails, texts, or phone calls. However, none of the remaining features even work that well. Because of that outdated processor, pretty much any sort of task is excruciatingly slow. Remember that smartwatches were designed to make your life easier by allowing you to do stuff that normally required you to pull out your phone. But trying to do basically anything other than checking the time for this watch is a really excruciating process. Now the final nail in the coffin is the aesthetic. This right here is a Samsung Galaxy Watch Active 2, and this is my original Moto 360. Now this watch was released in 2019 and it has better battery life, more features, and a way better display. But at the end of the day, both of these watches are essentially just circular displays strapped to your wrist. Now it's not all bad. These watches are definitely readable in all sorts of different lighting conditions. You also get the luxury of changing your watch face at any time. Some of these watch faces are pretty good, some of them are okay, and some of them are pretty ugly. My main issue is that these watch faces, they really don't have a soul. It's kind of the same thing as having a virtual pet or virtual car in a video game. It's just not the same as having the real thing. There's a certain aesthetic and charm to having a watch with a real watch face. And that's lost when you have a digital screen that's just strapped to your wrist. So in conclusion, why do people still buy traditional watches instead of just smartwatches? Well, going back to my Casio Digital, this watch has a battery life of 5 years, and the battery can be replaced for 10 to 15 bucks. This Moto 360, the battery life is less than a day, and you pretty much can't replace the battery. This watch here, even though there aren't too many features, they'll still retain them after 5 or even 10 years. And this watch has lost half of its features. This watch is timeless, and this watch never sees the time of day anymore. So what it really boils down to is that this watch is disposable. It's meant to be used for maybe 2 or 3 years and then tossed out. It's not meant to last for years and years or be passed on to generations. It's meant to be thrown away. Now traditional watches, on the other hand, these guys can last a lifetime, which is why I prefer them over smartwatches. And it's also why I've decided to make a channel about watches. So anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.